Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday MBA, the show that explores tactics for business success that you don't learn in business school. I'm your host, Kevin Craine, and I'm so pleased that you're listening. And so pleased to welcome John Brubaker to the program. John is the author of 6 books on leadership performance, 2 of which are award winners, The Coach Approach and Seeds of Success, which was recognized as the 2013 Business Book of the Year at the Hollywood Book Festival, and it's been adapted into a screenplay for a major motion picture. His new book is called Stadium Status, Taking Your Business to the Big Time, where he reveals the tactics employed by country musicians, sports teams, and big brands who have all moved from the small stage to the big time. And we'll talk specifically about the ways that top musicians today build their fan base, elevate their performance, and separate themselves from the other guy, and how we can do it too in business. Stay tuned after the interview for 3 action items that we can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice in this interview. And if you like what we do here at Everyday MBA, why not subscribe? That way, you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, really everywhere and anywhere you find your podcasts now. Or just go to everyday-mba.com. It's all there. Now, on to the interview. John Brubaker, welcome to Everyday MBA. What is stadium status?
Stadium status is a term that scholarly journal, Urban Dictionary, would define it as being a big enough star that you could fill an entire stadium when you're performing a concert. You know you're big once you've achieved stadium status. And I think that's the place, you don't have to be an entertainer to want to achieve stadium status. I know just most of my clients in business, that's what they're looking for too. We all have a desire to be known.
And it's really building your audience just like a musician would, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask you about that. I'm a musician myself, and so I'm curious about the strategies that you talk about in your book that are used by musicians and brands to build their fan base, differentiate themselves from the other guy. And one example you talk about is Garth Brooks, certainly one of the most successful brands in the music business for sure. And you talk about how Garth uses the worst seats in his house or in the house to his advantage. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I would say Garth Brooks is the most stadium status entertainer of any genre ever. Believe it or not, he sold more albums than the Beatles. And think about the popularity of the White Album. But Garth is, I think he got to stadium status by doing things a little differently. And anyone that's ever seen Garth Brooks in concert is going to start nodding their head up and down, saying, I know exactly what you're talking about when I say this, Kevin. And it's that no matter where you're sitting in the arena, big venue, small venue, doesn't matter. At some point in the show, you feel like he is looking you in the eye and singing directly to you. And I've had that experience on 2 occasions. Once earlier in his career, I saw him in Mellon Arena in Pittsburgh, smaller venue, and you just got the feeling that he was, connecting with you and everyone else around you, even though, we were up in the nosebleeds. And I saw him a few years later with a couple million other raving fans when he performed in 1997, did that free concert in Central Park, brought out Billy Joel at the end.
Right.
I was at the back of the venue there, like the very back of the park. We got there late, and it didn't matter. You felt like his connection with you extended all the way back. And here's why. It's a fascinating thing that I learned he does. In the morning of a show, what he will do while the crew is loading in all the equipment, setting up the lights and everything on stage, is he'll be sitting up in literally the worst seat in the house. He'll be sitting in that obstructed view seat in the nosebleeds of the arena or stadium, sipping his coffee, looking down on the stage. And what he's not doing is he's not micromanaging or just kind of looking over the shoulders of his crew. What he's doing is he's putting himself in his worst customer's seat and viewing, how they're going to view him later that evening from their vantage point. And as soon as I learned that, it all made sense. The experience I had in a small venue with him and the experience in Central Park. He's just a great connector. I think there's a lesson for everyone from that strategy, no matter what industry or business you're in. How do you take let's say your smallest customer, your worst customer, and treat them to such a mind-blowing experience that they then grow and become a customer for life and become really one of your key accounts. And Garth does, like, if that wasn't enough, that he puts himself in the worst customer's shoes, what he also does is, per his contract with each of these venues, and you probably saw it recently in his comeback tour, he just did this with a couple of people in Oklahoma City at a show. And what he does is he buys up a set of tickets on the front row in each of his shows, and he'll send Usher up to those worst seats in the house. And it's almost theatrical, Kevin. He'll have the usher ask to see their tickets and say, "Oh, you're in the wrong seats, folks." Like, let's say a family of 4, husband, wife, 2 kids.
Right.
And they'll look behind them and they're going to see like a brick wall or cinder blocks. And they're thinking, really, it gets worse than this? How's this possible? And then, they have this aha moment because the usher says, "Mr. Brooks sent me up here. Your seats are down there with him tonight." And he points to empty seats that are roped off in the front row reserved for that family. So you think about going from the worst seat in the house to the best seat in the house and how we could do that for our customers like he does. He creates customers for life. And it's no surprise that after going off the road, essentially retiring to raise his kids, he's come back and hasn't missed a beat. The fans are showing up. He has to extend his tour stop dates to accommodate, let's say, instead of 1 show in Kansas City, he's going to do 3 because of the demand. The demand has not subsided because he's made such a deep connection with his customers.
Hi, this is Don Yeager, author of Great Teams, 16 Things High-Performing Organizations Do Differently, and you are listening to Everyday MBA with Kevin Craine.
Folks, podcasting is really taking off. According to Edison Research, over 1/3 of Americans now listen to podcasts on a regular basis. That's 89 million potential clients, customers, and listeners. Is it time for you and your business to get into podcasting? I can help. I'm a podcast producer and media consultant, and I'd be pleased to explore how I can make a difference producing a podcast for you. Just go to cranegroup.com to find out more. That's CRAINE, cranegroup.com. I'm easy to find. Let's talk soon.
You're listening to Everyday MBA.
One thing that musicians often do differently and often better than businesses is working to connect with their audience in those kinds of really meaningful ways. I mean, now you're describing people that are going to be, like you said, Garth Brooks fans for life. So what are some other ways that maybe businesses could work to make that kind of connection in their world?
Well, I like to use the example of what, Garth takes it a step further. And what he does that I use as an example for every business is, I saw him in Mellon Arena, and he, took family from the back row to the front row, and a little girl in the family reached out after they were seated in the front row and handed him a rose. Like, she actually showed up at that venue with, the worst seats in the house and thought she might be able to get to meet Garth and give him a flower. So what does he do? He stops the show at the end of his song, takes off his guitar, takes the flower from her, hands her his guitar. This is a couple $1,000 Takamine guitar, and has a stagehand come over with a Sharpie, and he autographs it for her. And the lesson there for business owners is, over deliver, provide a mind-blowing experience, that you're not questioning in your mind, well, what's this going to cost me to do this for the customer, when they haven't spent a whole lot with me. Because you're building trust, you're creating that social equity, like the word of mouth advertising you create when you do things like that is something money can't buy when you provide them with that kind of experience. And that's
So that $2,000 guitar becomes a minuscule little expense compared to the goodwill and so forth that's associated with giving it away.
Yeah. And think about, like, I just reflect on how many times I've told that story, either at a speaking engagement, media appearance, anything, a workshop I'm doing for one of my clients. Like, the amount of mileage he's gotten out of creating experience for someone, it's exponentially greater than the cost.
It almost becomes folk legend in a way. It may not have ever even been, necessarily true or exactly the way it gets described, but that story lives on in that goodwill, moving on forward in time.
Sure. And I think that, we look so often at ROI in our businesses instead of looking at ROR, return on relationship, as opposed to return on investment. And I think if we led, with what's best for the customer, treating our fans to a mind-blowing experience of our own in our business, we're going to be rewarded handsomely in ways we never anticipated.
Well, and I think one thing you mentioned earlier that I think is key to that, often us in business, we talk about, customer delight and so forth. But we can miss the mark by not really having the right perspective. And you talked about sitting in the very back seat and really physically sitting in the seat of your customer, your audience. I mean, you're physically sitting there. And I think that's an important perspective that business owners need to develop on their own. What is it like to be my customer? Have I purchased my own product or visited my own website or dealt with my staff or my phone tree or my whatever it is that I do? Have I gone through that process in the way that's very much like how my customers go through that process? And what's that really feel like in a real way? Not how I think it is or how I wish it was, but how it really is.
Yeah, and the media like to portray it. Like, take the example of the TV show Undercover Boss, which I struggle with using the term reality TV with those kinds of shows. So they like to dress it up. But what Garth has done and what any business owner or leader can do by literally just putting yourself in the customer's shoes, that's Undercover Boss well before that was ever even a thing on TV.
Our guest today is John Brubaker. His book is Stadium Status, Taking Your Business to the Big Time. You can get your copy at the Everyday MBA bookstore at everyday-mba.com/bookstore.
Hi, this is Amy Bruschi, co-author of Business is Business, Reality Checks for Family-Owned Companies, and you are listening to Everyday MBA with Kevin Craine.
Are you an entrepreneur, a business owner, or a startup and need to craft and communicate a better message? Or maybe you're a C-suite leader, a business professional, or an independent consultant, and you need to boost your profile as a knowledge leader. I can help. I'm a writer, editor, communications consultant, and podcast producer, and I'd be pleased to explore how I can make a difference. Just go to cranegroup.com, that's C-R-A-I-N-E, cranegroup.com, to find out more about me and my services. C-R-A-I-N-E, cranegroup.com. I'm easy to find. Let's talk soon. John, another strategy you talk about is narrowcasting versus broadcasting. Can you explain?
From an advertising standpoint, we love to broadcast our message. And I look at broadcasting the message really kind of like a shotgun blast. It's spray and pray marketing. You don't really know if you're hitting the mark or not, versus narrowcasting and having a very clear idea of exactly who your ideal clients are or customers, and targeting that messaging, tailoring, I should say, targeting sounds mercenary, tailoring that message to them. And I think the best example I can give you would be comparing two different album releases, one from country music genre and one from pop. And how I share this with business owners is I think you're a marketer. You're one of two types of marketers. You're either a U2 marketer or you're an Eric Church kind of business. And what I mean by that is when U2 released their last album, they partnered with iTunes, and it was sort of, if you'll recall, I'm sure everyone remembers, is back in September 2014, the 500 million iTunes users just had the new U2 album, whether you wanted it or not, automatically downloaded into your account. And it was kind of like that spray and pray marketing. It sort of was the musical equivalent of junk mail in my mind. I'm a U2 fan, but like I felt like my privacy was violated when that quote thing that was intended as a free gift really kind of invaded my device. And
it was a backfire in a way.
It was a colossal failure, and they actually undersold themselves on that deal. But I compare that to what Eric Church did when he released his latest album, Mr. Misunderstood. He didn't tell anyone on November 4th in 2015 that he was releasing a new album, to the point where he had vinyl records made in Europe so no one would find out about it back here, and had those shipped for free as a gift to all the members of his fan club called the Church Choir, with a handwritten note. Like, think about like the difference between digital versus analog marketing. A handwritten note and a vinyl record, surprise and delight, your biggest fans. He didn't advertise. It was just kind of like Beyonce. He just dropped a new album, surprise drop. But he did it by focusing on his narrowcasting to his first few fanatics, the people in his fan club. And I think we all have, those super fans in our businesses. And when we give something as a gift, again, with no expectation, anything in return, the rewards will come back to us, tenfold. And what happened was he gave away to like over 700 customers who would have gladly stood in line and bought the record. He gave it away to them. But what that did was it created this viral buzz on social media and word of mouth. People posting pictures, talking about it, playing the music, releasing YouTube videos about, the surprise album drop. And when it hit the market after that, it was a huge success. 71,000 copies were sold in the first 30 hours. It ranked number 3 in the Billboard Top 100. No promotion, no media strategy, no formal press release or, press conference announcing it. He just surprised and delighted his biggest fans and let them take it from there.
Do you believe part of the success of those two different approaches, or not success, is maybe what customers perceive as the motivation behind it, where you're talking about one artist that seems to be very authentic about giving the music away, whereas the other is, like U2, for example, it's connected with iTunes, and it seemed to be an intrusion as opposed to a delight. I mean, is that the magic sauce behind things like that, how you're really perceived, or the actual motivation behind what you're doing?
I completely agree with you, Kevin. I think it's scarcity versus abundance. U2 hadn't released an album. Their brand, had been, just kind of petering out until then. And they were afraid, like, how much, if they
released it, they wouldn't sell.
Yeah, how many are we really going to sell? This will make us look bad. Why don't we give it away? But trust me, Apple paid them a few $1 million for it. As a business, they may have made more money on that Apple deal than they would have been on selling that record, and indeed guaranteed return. So from a business point of view, it made total sense. Unfortunately, maybe from a user point of view or a customer point of view, it kind of backfired. Yeah, and it always bothers me. Like, I felt bad for them, because really what that signaled to me and to everyone in the market was they really weren't betting on themselves and their talent, as opposed to Eric Church. Right. I think it's the 80-20 rule as well. 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts, or, in his case, 20% of his fan base, his fan club, really drove that to number 3 in the Billboard Top 100. He did that out of abundance. He wasn't afraid of what people would think, would or wouldn't it sell. And really, he kind of bet on himself, because, regardless of what record label it was, if he actually approached them and told them he wanted to do that, they would have said, no way, you're out of your mind, and we're not going to let you do that.
It just shows that things are changing in ways that we can't predict or can't anticipate based upon our old models of how things typically work in the music business or in business in general.
Absolutely. I think it's a great lesson for all of us about the power of focus.
One of the things that you talk about, some artists really make their way by being kind of weird, like Lady Gaga, for example, or maybe Prince. Why is it important to embrace your weirdness?
Well, I'll borrow a quote from my friend Rick Barker, who was Taylor Swift's first manager and wrote a great book himself, Weird Wins. And when I interviewed him for Stadium Status, I said, Rick, what do you mean by that? And he just said, 98, his whole strategy with his artists he represents is 98% of the competition won't get weird, and they won't do that weird thing and put themselves out there and really take a chance. But if you're willing to get weird and embrace your weirdness like that, you only have to compete against the other 2% out there who are willing to do that with you. And that just really struck me as, you know what? I look back on different experiences I've had in business and when I was a college coach and kind of gambles and weird stuff that I did, it usually paid off because it wasn't a crowded place at that point. There wasn't as much competition. And, I think people are craving authenticity, Kevin, whether it's music and auto-tune or, videos and film we see today with Photoshop and just the ability to edit things and scrub things to within an inch of their life before, they hit the screen or the speakers. There's a general lack of authenticity. If you're a little weird and you embrace whatever's weird about you or your brand, that's going to ring very true, and that's going to resonate with a certain population who says, you know what? Wow, he's just like me. I'm a little quirky like that too. And I think that's really why we ought to embrace it. And like Rick Barker said, weird does win for that reason.
Well, John, it's been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. You've given us some great advice here today, but what was the best piece of advice that you ever received, and how has it shaped who you are?
The best piece of advice I ever received was from a great coach and mentor of mine named Randy Mills, and he's the person who gave me my first opportunity back in 1995 to become a college coach. And he had 42 years in the business, probably forgot more about coaching than most people will ever learn. And we're sitting on the bus on our way to an away game, and I'm reading a book about Vince Lombardi. I'll never forget it. He walks up and sits down next to me, and literally kind of takes the book out of my hand, slams it shut, and puts it down. And he said, "Kid, be the best, not the next." And I just kind of looked at him like, "Coach, what do you mean by that?" He's like, "None of the stuff Lombardi did would work with, Division III small college kids today." He's like, "Don't try and be the next Vince Lombardi or the next Lou Holtz or the next whoever. Be the best John Brubaker." And that always stuck with me because, no one can be the best you quite like you can be the best you. So it really, from that day forward, and that career for 12 years as a college coach, and now in my second career as an author and a speaker, I just wake up every morning trying to be the best version of myself and to be a little bit better me than I was yesterday.
That's John Brubaker. His book is Stadium Status, Taking Your Business to the Big Time. Get your copy at the Everyday MBA bookstore at everyday-mba.com/bookstore. John, thanks a lot for being my guest today on Everyday MBA.
Thank you, Kevin. It was a real pleasure.
Up next, our 3 action items for this week, things that we can do to take advantage of the ideas and advice in Stadium Status.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire, and you're listening to Everyday MBA with Kevin Craine. You must be prepared to ignite.
Everyday MBA is sponsored in part by cranegroup.com. That's CRAINE, cranegroup.com. Now, on to our action items for this week, things that we can do to take advantage of the ideas and advice in Stadium Status. Number 1, make yourself fan-worthy. One way to draw the analogy between the business of business and the business of music is this first action item. Make yourself fan-worthy. Think about the artists that have really devoted fans. We talked about Garth Brooks, but you can substitute your own. Adele comes to mind for me. Maybe Bruce Springsteen, Barbara Streisand. You can pick your own examples, but these are all musical artists who are big musical brands, big businesses in their own right. But why are they worthy of our devotion? What makes them fan-worthy? Lots of things, but certainly a few things come to mind. Quality. Their music is top quality. Authenticity. Garth, Bruce, Barbara, these are all pretty authentic artists. And authentic brands. And they stand for something. They have a quality that implies a position. Certainly Bruce Springsteen comes to mind. Or Garth. They're all artists that mean something to their fans anyway. There are other qualities. What might those be? And how do they align with what you do and your business? So action item number 1 today is to think about how to make yourself fan-worthy. What things can you do to have folks feel deeply about, say, the quality of what you do, or the authenticity of who you are, or who your business is? So action item number 1, make yourself fan-worthy. Number 2, create fan folklore. The story that John told us, about Garth setting aside a certain number of seats in the front row to swap out with fans that he finds in the very back of the stadium, or they find in the back of the stadium in the cheap seats. This is a story that's almost like folklore or fan lore, right? For every ticket he gives away for the front row, or every guitar that's signed and given away, how many stories do you think that get told again and again by super happy and devoted fans? Think of the goodwill that these stories, that fan folklore generates. These are the kind of stories that you want your customers and fans to tell. The unexpected and truly superior experience or service or value or memory that they got and now are sharing as a result of being your customer or fan. So action item number 2 today, create fan folklore. And finally, number 3, be the only one. There's really only one Garth Brooks, right? There's lots of country singers, but only one Garth. Garth is a little different, especially to his fans, right? There's only one Bruce Springsteen. There's lots of rock and roll singers, but there's only one boss. There's only one Lady Gaga, or only one Prince, or only one Adele. Their brand is unique. There are lots of singers, but each one is the only one. The same can be true in business with truly great brands that have devoted fans. One that comes to mind is Harley Davidson. There's lots of motorcycles out there, but there's only one Harley, right? There's only one legend, Harley. There's only one Apple. Lots of electronics, but only one Apple. So our final action item today is to be the only one. It's not like you're the only country singer or the only computer maker or the only motorcycle maker. But you're the only one. You're the only Garth, or the only Apple, or the only Harley. There we have our action items for this week. Get your copy of Stadium Status by John Brubaker at the Everyday MBA bookstore at everyday-mba.com/bookstore. That'll do it for this episode of Everyday MBA. Join me next time when I continue to talk with best-selling authors, innovative thought leaders, and top-shelf executives, all sharing their best techniques and tips that you won't learn in business school. I'm your host, Kevin Craine. This is Everyday MBA. Thanks for listening.